James Watson died recently on November 6, 2025, so I thought it fitting to commemorate his achievements in science. James Watson and Francis Crick discovered DNA in 1953, when hereditary genes were not yet considered controversial. Both of them were awarded a Nobel Prize for their discoveries. However, unbeknownst to Dr. Watson, we would soon enter the age of political correctness, when liberal academies would begin to claim that the science of genetics is a social construct. Ordinary topics like race, gender, IQ, and sexuality would become highly controversial. In the beginning of the second millennia, James Watson was shamed and shunned by the scientific community for what is known as scientific racism. It all started with Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. This laboratory is how Dr. Watson himself was nourished for nearly 40 years of his life. In fact, James Watson served as director of Cold Spring Harbor for 26 years, president for another 10 years, and chancellor for 3 years, until things started to go awry. Dr. Watson began to utter opinions which he, in his old age, did not realize had become highly charged topics that would attract a lot of attention. He said things like, "I am inherently gloomy about the prospect of Africa, because all our social policies are based on the fact that their intelligence is the same as ours, whereas all the testing says, not really." He also said, "I wish races were equal in intellectual capacity, but people who have to deal with black employees find this is not true." These are both statements that he allegedly made in a 2007 interview with journalist Charlotte Hunt Grubb, who also happened to be his former lab assistant. She published this interview in article form in the Sunday Times, but I have found it impossible to find this interview or the original article anywhere. Dr. Watson later stated about the interview that, "I cannot understand how I could have said what I am quoted as having said. However, he most certainly said this: there is a difference on average between blacks and whites on IQ tests. The difference is genetic." He made that statement in 2019 in the PBS documentary American Masters, Decoding Watson, which is viewable on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description. Perhaps the damage was already done long before any of these comments were made. The damage was done when he discovered DNA, therefore linking genetics with race and race with IQ, and IQ with genetics, making him the oldest, whitest, most intrinsically racist person who ever lived. He might as well have been the bastard child of Hitler and Eva Braun that nobody ever knew about. Jokes aside, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory essentially forced him to resign in 2007, and then in 2019 revoked his honorary titles and severed all ties with him for comments he made regarding race and genetics. He became the first person to sell his Nobel Prize medal while still alive, selling it because he felt that he had been ostracized by the scientific community. He seemed to have been hurt by the ordeal and said that he had been abandoned by his peers. "You find out who your friends are when you're involved in a scandal," said Elizabeth Taylor. He planned on donating part of the proceeds from the sale of the Nobel Prize medal to support scientific research. However, by a generous twist of fate, Russian billionaire Alisher Osmanov bought the medal just to return it to Watson so that Dr. Watson could keep the medal and so that the money could still be used for charity. Isn't that nice? Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory called his statements reckless and reprehensible, and Dr. Watson apologized for his insensitivity. But when asked on the documentary American Masters if his views had changed, he said, "Not at all." That's what I call intellectual honesty. His son Rufus, in an interview, said that his father's statements might make him out to be a bigot and discriminatory, but that was not true. Said Rufus, "They just represent his rather narrow interpretation of genetic destiny. My dad had made the lab his life, and yet now the lab considers him a liability." Dr. Watson was 97 years old when he left this world, having changed biological science forever. You did well, Dr. Watson. You did well. In conclusion, I think it's worth noting that in 2023, I personally spent several hours making calls to various health facilities and psychologists in vain to try to take a legitimate IQ test, which I was unable to do. Evidently, they don't even administer IQ tests anymore unless it's to test for a disability or mental health disorder. Don't forget to like and subscribe.